block of heavy maple resting by the kitchen sink. A block of heavy maple resting by the kitchen sink. A block of heavy maple resting by the kitchen sink. A block of heavy maple resting by the kitchen sink. A block of heavy maple resting by the kitchen sink. A block of heavy maple, but I took the silver steel and brought it downward to the wood, prepping all the dinners right exactly where we stood. The blade left tiny valleys cutting deep into the pine, a messy intersection of your history and mine. I used to want a pristine house without a single flaw, a shiny sort of prison governed by a rigid law. But you prefer the evidence of living in the space, the rugged little scratches bringing character and grace. The knife strikes down and leaves a quiet, honest mark. The knife strikes down and leaves a quiet, honest mark. The worn grain carrying the scars of making home. You don't erase the damage or replace the wooden board. You celebrate the history that others just ignored. I run my thumb across the deep and intersecting lines and trust the quiet comfort of these ordinary signs. The worn grain carrying the scars of making home. You don't erase the damage or replace the wooden board. You celebrate the history that others just ignored. I run my thumb across the deep and intersecting lines and trust the quiet comfort of these ordinary signs. People buy the marble just to keep the surface cold, a sterile kind of story that will never getting old. But marble dulls the knife and brings a harsh that doesn't have the memory the wooden fibers bring. We chop the bitter onions and we slice the summer fruit, a daily sort of anchor on a winding, messy route. The board absorbs the juices and the oil from the pan, a rugged illustration that I finally understand. Strike the silver blade, let the dinner start. The hungry soul heal the tired heart. I rest inside the haven of the quiet evening shade. I realize that loving is a sacrificial block, a willingness to tolerate the cutting and the shock. You don't demand perfection from the messy life we lead. You offer up your surface to supply the things we need. I wipe the maple clean and let it dry into the air, appreciating every single little furrow there. The kitchen light is dimming and the evening meal is done. I lay my head against you as we wait upon the sun. The worn grain carrying the scars of making home safe and sound. But do not hide the damage or replace the wooden board. You hold the quiet history that others just ignored. The blade goes in the drawer and the kitchen finds a rest. I trust the rugged timber and I know that we are blessed. The meal is done, the wood is scarred, I am home. A rectangle, it was so lying flat upon the stone, waiting for the footsteps of a traveler coming home. The black ink used to spell and rub them out of sight. I walked across the muddy field and dragged the autumn rain, carrying center of the day, but there you place the woven mat outside the wooden frame. I scrape my tired soles against the rough and scratchy pad, leaving all the anger and the nasty days I had. The bristles take the burden, so the hallway stays secure. A rugged intervention keeping the interior pure. Dust at the door, catching all the dirt from the street. A humble sort of rescue for my tired, heavy feet. You don't just let me drag the freezing weather in the hall. You offer me a boundary to catch the dirty fall. I leave the toxic gravel on the outside of the mat. I step into your safety, and I leave the world at that. Dust at the door, catching all the dirt from the street. A humble sort of rescue for my tired, heavy feet. You don't just let me drag the freezing weather in the hall. You offer me a boundary to catch the dirty fall. I leave the toxic gravel on the outside of the mat. I step into your safety, and I leave the world at that. The fiber gets exhausted and begins to pull apart. A physical reflection of an understanding heart. People throw it in the trash and buy a pristine square, ignoring all the sacrifice surviving in the air. But I prefer the faded look, the edges turning brown. A loyal little soldier standing up against the town. You intercept the mess before it ruins all the clean. The most authentic barrier my tired eyes have seen. Scrape the heavy boots, let the gravel fall. Step across the line, walk into the hall. The outside world is bitter and the elements are crude, but you absorb the damage with a quiet attitude. I realize that loving is a threshold we protect, a willingness to clean the things we wander and neglect. You do not ask me to pretend I never walk the mud. You just provide a haven for the heavy, rushing blood. I push the front door open, and that's now the roasting pine. A magical transition, making your affection mine. The shoes are left behind me, and my socks are hitting wood. I rest inside the living room, exactly as I should. Dust at the door, dust at all the dirt from the street. Safe inside, nowhere to hide. You don't just let me drag the freezing weather in the hall. You offer me a boundary and save me from the fall. I leave the heavy gravel on the outside of the mat. I walk into your haven, and I leave the world at that. The boots are off, the hall is clean, I am home. A folded piece of navy lying in the bottom chest, left alone in darkness for a very careless rest. We wore it in the autumn when the air began to bite, a shield against the shivers of the early winter night. The fabric was a tight and interconnected sort of mesh, a barrier to insulate the bone and tired flesh. But spring arrived and pushed the heavy sweater out of mind, a tragic little habit leaving vital things behind. We locked it in the drawer without a block of cedar wood, ignoring all the maintenance to keep the fabric good. I pulled it from the shadow and the frost returned today, expecting the familiar warmth to chase the cold away. But holding up the navy to the ceiling bedroom light revealed a dozen punctures leaking out the starry white. The tiny insects feasted in the silence of the dark, erasing the integrity. Holes in the wool, letting all the freezing winter through, a visual confession of the fading of the two. I try to pull the fabric tight to cover up the skin, but drafty air is rushing where the damage settled. And you cannot wear a garment that was eaten in the shade. I stare at the destruction of the careless choice we made. Holes in the wool, letting all the freezing winter through, a visual confession of the fading of the two. I try to pull the fabric tight to cover up the skin, but drafty air is rushing where the damage settled. And you cannot wear a garment that was eaten in the shade. I stare at the destruction of the careless choice we made. Try to take a needle just to stitch the borders close, to camouflage the ruined spots the fading light exposed. But pulling at a rotten thread just makes the circle wide, a miserable tactic to protect a foolish pride. We starved the conversation and we locked it in a box, expecting love to hibernate behind the wooden locks. But negligence is lethal to a vulnerable thread. It eats the quiet promises and leaves the spirit dead. Pull the heavy sweater, feel the sudden chill. Fail to find the comfort on the windowsill. The warmth is compromised and the garment is destroyed. I am standing freezing in an isolated void. I realize that hiding in affection in the dark is throwing wide the entrance to a devastating shark. Love requires air and an intentional design. You cannot throw it in the drawer and hope it turns out fine. We lost the insulation by forgetting it was there, a quiet sort of tragedy inside the chilling air. I take the ruined navy and I drop it in the trash, accepting that the history is turned to silent ash. I walk into the avenue and brave the biting frost, a harsh and sudden reckoning of everything we lost. Holes in the wool, letting all the freezing winter through. Let it dry, visual confession of the fading of the two. I try to wear the fabric, but the drafts were blowing in. I surrender the illusion of the era we were in. You cannot save a garment that was eaten in the shade. I walk away from freezing and the careless choice we made. The wool is torn, the chest is empty, I am done. A blade of iron planted in the center of the lawn, a victim of the rain returning right before the dawn. We meant to dig a trench to lay the quiet sleep in seed, a mutual agreement on a highly vital need. We took the wooden handle and we pushed it in the ground, an optimistic motion without any warning sound. But sudden thunder cracked and we retreated to the hall, leaving the equipment for the bitter rain to fall. We didn't bring the metal to the safety of the shed, a careless hesitation for the heavy words we said. The water soaked the iron and oxidized the steel, a quiet little murder of the things we tried to feel. I walked into the garden when the storm had finally passed and found the ruined instruments stuck firmly in the grass. The rust consumes the silver and the handle starts to rot, a devastating portrait of the negligence we got seized in the dirt, locked inside a heavy, muddy tomb. I try to pull the handle, but the iron refuses to yield. A paralyzed illusion on a devastated field. You cannot plan a future with the tool that turned to dust. I stare at the destruction of a solitary trust, seized in the dirt, locked inside a heavy, muddy tomb. I try to pull the handle, but the iron refuses to yield. A paralyzed illusion on a devastated field. You cannot plan a future with the tool that turned to dust. I stare at the destruction of a solitary trust. Wooden grip to try and pull the metal free, a frantic sort of effort just to save the history. But pulling rotten timber only snaps the brittle neck, leaving me a splinter in a fascinating wreck. We ran from the discomfort and we left the work behind, expecting the garden to be naturally kind. But tools demand a shelter and a dedicated dry. They perish when abandoned underneath an angry sky. Snap the wooden grip, watch the splinters fly. Fail to dig the earth underneath the sky. The garden is a failure and the instrument is dead. I am walking from the echo of the promises we made. I realize that planning requires staying in the rain, a willingness to tolerate the miserable pain. If you drop the shovel every time the weather turns, you forfeit the harvest that a patient spirit earns. We abandon our foundation at the earliest alarm and sacrifice the metal to a solitary harm. I kick the rusted blade deeper down into the clay, accepting I won't cultivate the property today. I turn my collar upward and I leave the empty yard. I walk out to the avenue, my tired heart is scarred. Seized in the dirt, locked inside a heavy, muddy tomb. Time to stop, pull the handle, but the timber had to snap. I surrender the illusion of our solitary map. You cannot plan a future with the tool that turned to dust. I walk away completely from the suffocating rust. The spade is stuck, the yard is bare, I am done. used to tie the nylon right around the naked seam, a desperate maneuver for a fragile little dream. But friction is a monster tearing cotton in the dark, a sudden execution of a solitary spark. The top was pulling loose and letting in the freezing rain, a tragic exhibition of a solitary pain. But you stepped in the weather with the heavy metal rain and changed the trajectory of every single thing. You punched a solid circle in the corner of the sheet, a rugged intervention turning back the sad defeat. You don't just tie the rope and hope the fabric stays intact. I do not have to rip apart when pressure hits the peak. You give my edge the heavy brass my tired shoulders seek. You don't just tie the rope and hope the fabric stays intact. I do not have to rip apart when pressure hits the peak. You give my edge the heavy brass my tired shoulders seek. People wrap the string around a temporary patch, a cowardly solution that the weather tends to catch. But metal doesn't compromise when screaming winds arrive. It bites into the cotton and it helps the tarp survive. I slide the nylon rope inside the circle you designed, leaving the anxiety of tearing far behind. The canvas stretches tight but the perimeter holds fast, the physical devotion that is engineered to last. Pull the heavy rope, watch the fabric bend, trust the metal ring like a steady friend. The storm is hitting hard but the corner doesn't tear. I am resting undercover in the freezing open air. I realize that loving is a reinforced design, a willingness to punch a hole and clarify the line. You don't just watch me struggle with the tension of the gale, you modify the structure so the vessel doesn't fail. I sit beneath the canopy and listen to the rain, protected from the sorrow and insulated from pain. The brass is growing colder but the interior is dry, a masterpiece of shelter underneath an angry sky. I trace the metal circle with the tip of my own thumb, and welcome every tempest that is ever going to come. You don't just tie the rope and hope the fabric stays intact. You don't just tie the rope and hope the fabric stays intact. The storm is blowing heavy, but the shelter holds the shade. I trust the brass connection, and I never seek escape. The wind pushes, the ring holds, I am safe. I used to stub my toe against the elevated pine. I stumbled through the doorway, dropping everything I held. A daily little tragedy where clumsy habits dwelled. I walked around the perimeter to mitigate the trip, a terrifying navigation on a sinking ship. I learned to lift my feet a little higher in the dark, consuming the momentum of my solitary spark. But you walked in carrying a wedge of heavy oak and silenced the anxiety before I even spoke. You slid the angled timber right against the sudden rise, a beautiful transition underneath my tired eyes. The brutal interruption turns into a quiet glide. The brutal interruption turns into a quiet glide. The smooth in the step, you don't erase the door or try to level out the floor. You build a quiet bridge so I don't stumble anymore. I don't have to hesitate or look down at my feet. You turn a hostile hurdle to a comfortable street. You don't erase the door or try to level out the floor. You build a quiet bridge so I don't stumble anymore. I don't have to hesitate or look down at my feet. You turn a hostile hurdle to a comfortable street. People say you have to learn to step a little high to conquer every obstacle beneath the open sky. But fighting every doorway is an agonizing chore. It drains the heavy spirit till you cannot walk no more. You didn't offer lectures on the raising of money. You fashioned a transition specifically for me. The wood is getting scuffed from the traffic of the day. A visual confirmation making all my panic stay. Walk across the ramp, do not break the stride. Glide into the room, nothing left to hide. The jarring hit has vanished in the sloping of the wood. I am navigating clearly, right exactly where I should. Oh, I realize that loving is an angled piece of pie. No willingness to rectify a hazardous design. You didn't change my clumsy walk or criticize my pace. You modified the entrance to a complicated place. I slide across the timber with the breaking of my flow. The most relieving journey that my tired feet can know. I turn around and look at the addition on the ground. The quietest expression of affection I have found. I step into the kitchen and I never look behind, trusting in the architecture of your quiet mind. Smoothing the step, taking out the sudden jagged hit. Safe inside, you don't erase the door or try to level out the floor. You build a quiet bridge so I don't stumble anymore. The transition is a haven and the stumbling is done. I walk across your timber and I step into the sun. Ooh. The step is smooth, the walk is easy, I am home. A tiny little cylinder of plastic on the dash, a casualty of summer and a devastating crash. I bought it in the winter for the chapping of the cold. We kept it in the console as a remedy for pain. A simple formulation in the middle of the rain. But July brought a fever that invaded through the glass. A terrifying temperature the shadows couldn't pass. I left the little cylinder exposed upon the tray. A careless calculation of an ordinary day. The solid wax surrendered to the heavy rising heat. A tragic liquid puddle in the center of the sea. I took the plastic cover off and watched the liquid spill. A horrifying ending to a fabricated will. The structure is a puddle, losing everything it was. A devastating picture of the damage that it does. The shape is gone, melting the wax, losing all the edges and the lines. I try to hold the liquid, but it slips across my hand. A tragic execution, I can finally understand. You cannot use a remedy when the solid turns to soup. I drop the empty plastic in a solitary loop. Melting the wax, losing all the edges and the lines. I try to hold the liquid, but it slips across my hand. A tragic execution, I can finally understand. You cannot use a remedy when the solid turns to soup. I drop the empty plastic in a solitary loop. I try to put the cylinder inside the freezing air to resurrect the solid from a heavy dark despair. But chilling melted plastic only yields a jagged rock, a useless little pebble and a terrifying shock. We brought a quiet affection to an overwhelming fire, demanding it survive an uncontrollable desire. The pressure was a furnace that eradicated form. We left a quiet haven for a terrifying storm. Spill the heavy liquid, watch the texture fade. Fail to fix the damage in the quiet shade. The structure is demolished by the suffocating burn. I am standing in the wreckage of a lesson I must learn. I realize the forcing, a fragile thing to break, is volunteering for the weary foundation. To break love requires a moderate and insulated space. You cannot leave it burning in an unprotected place. We ruin the interior by pushing for extreme and shattered the mechanics of a collaborative dream. I wipe the sticky puddle from the center of the dash, accepting that the history has turned to silent ash. I toss the ruined plastic in the garbage by the pump, then walk away from staring at a miserable stump. Melting the wax, losing all the edges and the lines. Let it fall, a messy consequence of reading complicated signs. Lose it all, I try to freeze the puddle, but the texture was destroyed. I leave the broken plastic in a solitary void. You cannot use a remedy when the structure turns to soup. I turn my collar upward and I exit off the loop. The wax is ruined, the console is clean. I am done. Yeah, a heavy wooden canopy shading the wooden deck, a massive sort of shelter hiding an impending wreck. We stood the silver pole inside a heavy iron base to throw a cooling shadow on a solitary place. The fabric was a harbor against the blinding light, a confident protector making everything alright. But August brought a hurricane pushing from the sea, a devastating pressure pointed straight at you and me. I didn't turn the crank to fold the heavy canvas down. I trusted in the iron standing firmly in the town. The wind caught in the fabric like an aerodynamic sail and turned the sturdy shelter to a terrifying tale. The hollow silver cylinder bent sharply at the root, a violent termination of a solitary route. The metal rips in pieces and the canopy falls flat. I stare at the destruction and I leave the world at that. Snapped at the base, falling on the heavy wooden floor. I cannot trust the shadow of the canopy no more. I try to fight the hurricane with the fabricated shield and watch the silver column fundamentally yield. You cannot hold the weather with the hollow aluminum pipe. I step away entirely from the solitary embrace, falling on the heavy wooden floor. I cannot trust the shadow of the canopy no more. I try to fight the hurricane with the fabricated shield and watch the silver column fundamentally yield. You cannot hold the weather with the hollow aluminum pipe. I step away entirely from the solitary gripe. Tried to take the cylinder and prop the metal up, a desperate delusion drinking from an empty cup. But broken metal buckles when the lightest breezes blow, a terrifying whisper of the things I didn't know. We left the cell open in an overwhelming storm, demanding that the hurricane conform to our norm. The arrogance is fatal to a delicate design. It shatters the foundation of your history and mine. Crash! The heavy fabric, hear the metal tear, to fold the canvas in the freezing air. The wind is a dictator that eradicates the weak. I am standing in the wreckage of the shelter I was sick. I realize that loving is acknowledging the wind, a willingness to fold the tent where tragedies begin. If you defy the elements and hold the canvas wide, you volunteer to shatter all the places where you hide. I drag the broken canopy across the wooden deck, accepting the reality of this colossal wreck. I throw the tangled fabric in the corner of the yard, a lesson that is punishing and undeniably hard. I stand beneath the open sky without a shade to throw. I turn my collar upward and I finally let you go. Snapped at the base, falling on the heavy wooden floor. Let it drop! I cannot trust the shadow of the canopy no more. Time to stop. I tried to prop the metal, but the structure had to break. I leave the broken shelter for my own exhausted sake. You cannot fight a hurricane with a hollow aluminum pipe. I walk into the avenue and drop the heavy grind. The pole is broke, the shade is gone, I am done. curved piece of metal resting by the wooden door. I used to crush the leather trying to force a bit of fit, breaking down the heel until the rigid fabric split. I pushed my tired ankles in an agonizing rush, ruining the structure in the early morning hush. My boots were losing shape and folding under the stress, a daily illustration of an undeniable mess. I couldn't find a rhythm to begin the rushing day. A clumsy navigation getting in my very way. But you handed me the brass with a faded golden shine, a smooth and steady angle that became a friend of mine. The friction disappears and the leather slides right in. You make the rough transitions an easy place to begin. Easing the stride, keeping the foundation strong. You don't just tie the laces or pretend the walk is light. You help me slip into the armor for the coming fight. I don't have to break my spirit trying to survive. You give me the momentum, keeping on my hope alive. Easing the stride, keeping the foundation strong. You don't just tie the laces or pretend the walk is light. You help me slip into the armor for the coming fight. I don't have to break my spirit trying to survive. You give me the momentum, keeping all my hope alive. People force the situation past the breaking line, expecting the reality to magically align. But forcing a connection only damages the base. It leaves an ugly wrinkle in a very fragile place. You angle the devotion with the calculated curve, protecting the stability my weary days observe. The tarnished metal chills the skin but warm the inner core. A quiet preparation stepping out the heavy door. Slide past the heavy friction, find the perfect fit. Stand on the solid pavement, never going to quit. The leather is unbroken and the heel is standing tall. I am walking through the city and I do not fear the fall. I realize that loving is a lubricating guide, a willingness to open up a comfortable ride. You don't demand I change my boots or buy a different pair. You offer an assistance in the freezing winter air. I place the metal shoehorn on the hook upon the wall, appreciating every single detail of it all. The journey is intimidating, rough and overgrown, but I step onto the concrete, knowing I am not alone. I trust the steady preparation, anchoring my feet and walk with clear intention down the center of the street. Keeping the foundation strong. You don't pretend the avenue is an easy place to go. You smooth the hard transitions in the only life I know. The leather wraps around me and the friction fades away. I trust your quiet guidance as I step into the day. Fit is smooth, the walk is easy, I am ready. Fit is smooth. A silver little box hiding in my denim coat, smelling like the fuel and the promises I wrote. I used to flick the plastic of a cheap and fragile brand. The wind would always kill it before the spark could catch, leaving me defeated with a broken little match. I stood up on the corner trying to ignite a light, a shivering spectator in the middle of the night. The draft was blowing violent, erasing every try. A disappointing routine underneath the winter sky. But you handed me the heavy case and flipped the metal lid, a rugged intervention for the things I kept hid. You struck the flint wheel with a confident display, a sudden rush of orange chasing all the ghosts away. The fluid hits the oxygen and holds the steady burn, a physical assurance on a very lonely trust the digital, then unreliable glow. A manufactured illusion that will never really grow. But in an analog foundation has a heartbeat of its own. A metal case reminding me I never stand alone. The brass is full of scratches from the tumbling in the dirt. A visual anatomy of exactly how we hurt. But scratches are a diary of surviving in the cold. A masterpiece of patience and a story turning old. Flick the silver wheel, hear the metal click. Burn the steady wick, making the shadows sick. The wind is pushing sideways, but the fire doesn't quit. I am standing in the avenue and navigating it. I realize that loving is a mechanical trust, a willingness to operate despite the dirt and dust. You didn't offer temporary warmth that fades away. You handed me an instrument designed to really stay. I closed a heavy lid and hear the satisfying snap. A confident coordinate upon my weary map. The darkness tries to swallow up the corners of the street, but I am insulated from a miserable defeat. I keep the heavy brass inside the pocket of my jeans and trust the quiet fire and everything it means. Pocket flame burning in the freezing winter wave. A durable defender where the better days begin. You don't extinguish easy when the weather takes a turn. You flip the metal cover back and let the orange burn. The flimsy plastic lighters are abandoned in the cold. I trust your heavy brass and let the story just unfold. The lit shuts, the spark stays, I am warm. We tried to sketch a future on a heavy piece of white. The color was a bold and undeniable display. But chalk is unforgiving if you press a bit too hard. A brittle kind of medium that leaves the fingers scarred. I wanted an intense and heavy saturation mine. The pressure snapped the cylinder right across the seam. A devastating fracture in the center of the dream. The crimson fell in pieces to the bottom of the floor. I cannot hold the fragmented potential anymore. The pigment turns to powder on the open, empty page. A messy termination of an optimistic age. I try to draw the picture, but the instrument is dead. I stand inside the shadow of the quiet words we said. You cannot paint a future when the chalk begins to crush. I sweep the broken crimson in a devastating hush. Dust on the canvas blowing in the open air. A tragic little ending to a beautiful affair. I try to draw the picture, but the instrument is dead. I stand inside the shadow of the quiet words we said. You cannot paint a future when the chalk begins to crush. I sweep the broken crimson in the devastating hush. I tried to use the broken half to finish up the face, to force the illustration in a compromised space. But scraping tiny pieces only ruins the design. We tried to force a delicate and fragile kind of bind, to hold a heavy anchor in a very shallow pond. The red is staining everything upon my tired skin. A messy visual record of the era we were in. Snap the brittle powder, watch the edges break. Smear across the paper for my own mistake. The medium is fragile and the pressure was too high. I am watching all the color disintegrate and die. I realize that forcing a connection to be bold is volunteering for the tragic story to unfold. Love requires patience and a very gentle touch. You cannot squeeze the cylinder and ask it for too much. We broke the vital chemistry by rushing up the pace and ruined the foundation of a very sacred space. I wipe the crimson powder with a damp and quiet cloth, accepting the reality of this aborted growth. The paper is a dirty and an interrupted white. I leave the broken pastel and I step into the night. Dust on the canvas blowing in the open air. Try to draw the picture, but the pressure had to break. I leave the still for my own exhausted sake. You cannot paint a future when the chalk begins to crush. I walk into the avenue and welcome in the hush. The chalk is broken, the page is smeared, I am done.
Bright and shining relic playing the artistic fool. We pumped it full of oxygen and floated in the sun, believing that the season of the magic had begun. The water was a mirror reflecting the azure sky, a comfortable haven hiding a deceptive lie. But hidden in the scene was a microscopic tear, a slow and steady exit of the necessary air. I didn't hear the whistling or feel the sinking weight, lost inside the fiction of a manufactured fate. The plastic started wrinkling and sagging in the heat, a physical progression of an undeniable defeat. The yellow ring was folding in the center of the wave, a tragic destination I couldn't try to save. The buoyancy is fading and the water rushes in, erasing all the buoyancy of where we had begun. Sinking summer, drifting on a ruined tide wave, a hollow sort of vessel I am terrified to save. I try to stay afloat, but the air is bleeding out. I'm drowning in a river of a paralyzing doubt. You cannot ride the surface when the mechanism dies. I stare at the deflation underneath the open skies. Oh, I sink in summer, drifting on a ruined tide wave of a hollow sort of vessel I am terrified to save. I try to stay afloat, but the air is bleeding out. I am drowning in a river of a paralyzing doubt. You cannot ride the surface when the mechanism dies. I stare at the deflation underneath the open skies. Patch the vinyl with a sticky strip of tape to orchestrate a desperate and a temporary escape. But patching wet material is a failing kind of art. It slides across the surface of a devastating heart. We ignore the early warnings of the miserable slack, pretending we were floating on a legendary track. But physics is an enemy that you cannot just ignore. The plastic pulls me downward to the bottom of the floor. Hiss, the vital oxygen escaping in the breeze. Sink the heavy plastic down upon its knees. The magic was an illusion we engineered in vain. I am standing in the shallow and accepting all the pain. I realize that forcing a deflated raft to float is clinging to a sinking and an uncooperative boat. Love requires a structure that doesn't slowly leak, a solid destination that the weary travelers seek. We sacrifice the summer to a microscopic hole, a silent execution of an isolated soul. I drag the ruined yellow to the edges of the tile and step onto the concrete with a bitter, fading smile. I leave the empty plastic sitting flat upon the ground and walk away from the illusion that we briefly found. Sinking summer, drifting on a ruined tide. Let it drop, a hollow sort of vessel. I am terrified. Time to stop. I try to stay surface when the mechanism dies. I leave the empty swimming pool and wave the ghost goodbye. The float is flat, the water is still. I am done.
A flat piece of timber resting by iron stove, a rugged little instrument, the tip is wearing down into a tired eyes observe. I used to let the fire burn the edges of the pan, a frantic sort of kitchen with an uncoordinated plan. The ingredients were bitter and the temperature was high, a recipe for trouble underneath an open sky. But you picked up the timber and you stepped into the smoke and silenced all the panic before I even spoke. You mixed the different flavors with the steady rhythmic sway and chased the burning ashes of my history away. The timber hits the metal and it scrapes the bottom clean, the most reliable magic that my kitchen has ever seen. Stirring the heat, folding in the bitter and sweet. You don't just turn the burner off and walk out of the room. You stand inside the fire and eradicate the gloom. I don't have to fear the boiling of a complicated day. You smooth the messy edges and you make the flavor stay. Stirring the heat, folding in the bitter and sweet. You don't just turn the burner off and walk out of the room. You stand inside the fire and eradicate the gloom. I don't have to fear the boiling of a complicated day. You smooth the messy edges and you make the flavor stay. Try to buy a gadget with a shiny silver blade, ignoring all the effort and the promises you made. But silver scratches iron and it leaves an ugly mark, a violent kind of friction in the middle of the dark. You choose the softer timber to protect the cooking base, a deliberate affection in an ordinary place. The wood absorbs the spices and it deepens in the tone, a permanent reminder I am never standing alone. Scrape the heavy iron, keep the movement slow. Let the rising vapor, let the comfort grow. The fire is a danger but the timber holds the line. I taste the quiet victory and know the recipe is mine. I realize that loving is a daily active chore, a willingness to stand upon a heated, messy floor. Take the raw emotion and you fold it in the pot, appreciating every single ragged thing we got. I wipe the wooden handle and I set it on the rack, a confident coordinate I'm never giving back. The dinner is completed and the house is feeling warm. I sit across the table and weather out the storm. Stirring the heat, folded in the bitter and sweet, safe and sound, quiet intervention for a runaway defeat. You don't just turn the burner off and walk out of the room. You integrate the chaos and eradicate the gloom. The meal is finally ready and the tension fades to gray. I trust your quiet rhythm as I wake to face the day. The fire dims, the taste is rich, I am home.
Ooh, on my neck. A length of woven fabric resting on the closet. The wind would slip its fingers right beneath my collarbone. A chilling validation I was walking out alone. But you brought out the fabric and you tossed it in the air and wrapped it twice around me with a dedicated care. You pulled the edges tighter just to block the rushing freeze. A tactile intervention bringing winter to its knees. The draft attempts to penetrate the woven heavy yarn, but I am standing steady like an oak tree by a barn. The heavy knit blocking out the freezing bitter chill. A physical defense against the winter's angry will. You don't erase the blizzard or demand the sun to shine. You tie the comfort round me and you make the safety mine. I don't have to shiver when I walk into the street. You give my fragile spirit an undeniable retreat. The heavy knit blocking out the freezing bitter chill. A physical defense against the winter's angry will. You don't erase the blizzard or demand the sun to shine. You tie the comfort round me and you make the safety mine. I don't have to shiver when I walk into the street. You give my fragile spirit an undeniable retreat. People trust a flimsy silk to navigate the ice. A superficial vanity that pays a heavy price. But you prefer a function that is rugged and profound. A massive sword of gravity keeping my feet on the ground. The wool is slightly itchy, but it generates the heat. A very worthy compromise to navigate the street. I bury my cold chin into the center of the fold and shut the heavy door against the terrifying cold. Wrap the heavy cotton, keep the winter out. Pull the quiet shelter, silence all the doubt. The frost is turning violent on the edges of the glass, but I am insulated while the freezing hours pass. I realize that loving is a very tactile shield. A willingness to venture on a frozen open field. You don't just watch me shiver in the middle of the rain. You loop the green material and wash away the pain. The fabric smells like cedar and a quiet roaring fire. A customized delivery of every deep desire. I walk into the avenue and let the snowflakes drop, knowing that your dedication isn't gonna stop. The heavy knit blocking out, I am safe. Chill in this physical defense against the winter's angry will. You don't erase the blizzard or demand the sun to shine. You wrap the fabric round me and you make the comfort mine. The wind is pushing hard, but my interior is warm. I trust the thick material and step into the storm. The wind howls, the wool holds, I am warm.
A tiny silver blade inside a little plastic block. A tool designed to navigate a complicated shock. We push the yellow timber in the center of the hole, expecting it to sharpen up the edges of the sole. The blade was meant to slice away the dullness of the wood, to clarify the vision of exactly where we stood. But metal loses temper when you use it every day, a dulling of the edge that slowly washes it away. I twisted down the pencil with an energetic turn, expecting a fresh needle and an optimistic burn. But dull machinery refuses to cooperate. It rips the cedar violently and guarantees our fate. The graphite snapped and tumbled to the bottom of the bin, a harsh and sudden ending to the era we were in. You cannot find a point when the mechanism fails. It only chews the timber on these complicated trails. Grinding the core, shredding up the yellow fragile pine, a devastating ruin of a functional design. I try to twist the pencil but the metal doesn't slice. It mandates an unbearable and terrifying price. We broke the heavy graphite trying to force a sharper view. I pull the ruined timber out and walk away from you. Grinding the core, shredding up the yellow fragile pine, a devastating ruin of a functional design. I try to twist the pencil but the metal doesn't slice. It mandates an unbearable and terrifying price. We broke the heavy graphite trying to force a sharper view. I pull the ruined timber out and walk away from you. I try to clear the shavings from the center of the blade, to resurrect the promise of the efforts we had made. But scraping out the wreckage doesn't sharpen up the steel. It only buys a moment for the panic that I feel. We took a blunt affection and we forced it in the grind, leaving all the gentleness and empathy behind. The pencil is a stub of jagged, ugly, splintered wood, a visual reflection of the place we misunderstood. The heavy timber, hear the silver scrape, break the fragile carbon, no sudden escape. The tool is weaponized and chewing up the fragile heart. I am standing in the wreckage as the pieces fall apart. I realize that forcing a revision with the flaw is begging for a tragedy to break a natural law. Love requires tools that have a delicate finesse, not a blunt instrument that generates a mess. We chewed the good intentions into piles of messy dust, a casual destruction of a necessary trust. I dropped the plastic sharpener inside the open trash and watched the ruined fragments turn to artificial ash. I will not try to draw a future with a broken leg. I walk into the daylight and I leave the things we said. Grinding the core, shredding up the yellow fragile pine, a devastating ruin of a functional design. I tried to twist the pencil but the graphite had to break. I surrender the illusion for my own exhausted sake. You cannot find a point when the mechanism dies. I toss the broken instrument and whisper my goodbyes. The lead is snapped, the blade is dull, I am done. Two pieces of pine connected by a wire coil. We clamped it on the cotton on a heavy drying line, believing the geometry was permanent and fine. The wind was blowing sideways off the center of the bay, testing out the boundary to see what gives away. The wet material was heavy, pulling on the wood.
a terrifying pressure right exactly where we stood. I watched the little silver spring begin to warp and bend, the quiet notification of a very sudden end. The tension hit the maximum and ripped the coil apart, a physical reflection of a devastated heart. The timber flew in halves across the quiet grassy lawn, a sudden realization that the anchor was withdrawn. The fabric flies away into the wild and open air. I am standing in the garden with a heavy, dark despair. Snap, spring, breaking under unrelenting strain. I try to hold the pieces, but the leverage is dead. A casualty of arrogance and heavy words we said. You cannot grip a burden when the tension is destroyed. I stare at the disaster in an isolated void. Snap, spring, breaking under unrelenting strain. I try to hold the pieces, but the leverage is dead. A casualty of arrogance and heavy words we said. You cannot grip a burden when the tension is destroyed. I stare at the disaster in an isolated void. I tried to bend the wire back to fit inside the groove, to artificially demand the heavy fabric not to move. But metal loses temper when it suffers a defeat, a miserable artifact upon a lonely street. We pushed our expectations on a fundamentally weak frame, demanding a perfection in a terrifying game. The wet clothes hit the mud and ruined all the quiet clean, the most pathetic ending that my tired eyes have seen. Snap, the heavy iron, watch the timber fly, fail to hold the boundary underneath the sky. The wind is a dictator that obliterates the weak. I am standing in the wreckage of the shelter I would seek. I realize that forcing a connection past the breaking point is guaranteeing trauma to the solitary joint. Love requires a flexibility to ride the sudden gale, not a rigid opposition that is guaranteed to fail. We clamped the heavy pressure down and shattered the design, a fatal execution of your history and mine. I dropped the broken pine into the center of the dirt, accepting the reality of exactly how we hurt. I leave the muddy fabric and I walk into the breeze, embracing the arrival of a sudden quiet ease. Snap, spring, breaking under unrelenting strain. Let it fall, tried to hold the pieces, but the leverage had to break. I leave the broken instrument for my exhausted sake. You cannot grip a burden when the tension is destroyed. I step away completely and I navigate the void. The spring is broke, the wood is split, I am done.
A cylinder of bark resting in the bottleneck, preventing the interior from turning to a wreck. I used to leave my feelings open to the open room, allowing all the oxygen to orchestrate my doom. The air would rush inside and turn the flavor bitter sour, a quiet kind of ending at the midnight hour. I lost the sweet vanilla and the traces of the oak, a victim of the careless and the hasty words I spoke. But you compressed the cork and pushed it in the narrow space, securing all the magic in a dedicated place. You trapped the velvet liquid in the safety of the dark, a patient agent process for an undercover spark. The seal is holding tight and keeping out the fading wind, a fortress for the quiet places where my soul has been. Sealing the vintage, keeping the bitter taste away, a rugged little guard against the wearing of the day. You don't don't just pour the glass and leave the rest to turn to rust. You plug the open damage with a very steady trust. I don't have to worry that the flavor falls apart. You age the deepest colors in the center of my heart. Sealing the vintage, keeping the bitter taste away. A rugged little guard against the wearing of the day. You don't just pour the glass and leave the rest to turn to rust. You plug the open damage with a very steady trust. I don't have to worry that the flavor falls apart. You age the deepest colors in the center of my heart. People leave the bottle out and wonder why it fades, trading true devotion for some temporary shades. But time is just a weapon if you leave the boundary wide. It murders the potential of the fragile things inside. You lie the bottle sideways in the quiet cooling rack, ensuring that the moisture never turns its fading back. The cork expands and grips the inner circle of the glass. A custom fitted armor watching all the seasons pass. Push into the narrow rim, keep the outside out. Rest inside the quiet chill, silence all the doubt. The liquid turns to velvet when you give it room to grow. I trust the simple barrier and let the ages flow. I realize that loving is a preservation art, a willingness to seal the vulnerable open heart. You don't expose my history to anyone who asks. You hide the tender vintage in the safety of the casks. The years will only deepen what we started in the spring. A rich and dark momentum changing every little thing. I run my thumb across the rugged texture of the wood and know the quiet promise is exactly understood. The world is rushing forward, but we hold a different pace. I settle in the darkness of this insulated space. Sealing the vintage, keeping the bitter taste away. Safe and sound, rugged little guard against the wearing of the day. On the ground, you don't just pour the glass and leave the rest to turn to rust. You seal the open boundary with an undeniable trust. The flavor holds its integrity and deepens in the dark. I lean into your shelter and I guard the quiet spark. The seal holds the wine breeze. I am safe. A tiny silver wheel pressing on the rubber tread, waiting for the motion to ignite the path ahead. No batteries inside to make the yellow bulb awake. It needs the spinning friction that my tired legs can make. We rode into the valley when the sun began to dip. I felt the shadow rising like a sinking fragile ship. I used to rely on a cheap and artificial flash, a plastic sort of safety bought with superficial cash. It always died exactly when the avenue got steep, a broken little promise that the plastic couldn't keep. But you pushed the pedal down, spun the silver gear. The friction made a halo that erased the rising fear. The faster we ride, the brighter the vision grows. The honest kind of power that a working spirit knows. The motor winds a steady tone against the spinning wheel. A generated energy confirming what I feel. Pedaling the glow, earning every inch of light. The collaborative engine in the middle of the night. You don't expect the magic just to fall into your hand. You push the heavy pedals and you light the dark land. We do not need a battery to navigate the road. We generate the fire carrying the heavy load. Pedaling the glow, earning every inch of light. The collaborative engine in the middle of the night. You don't expect the magic just to fall into your hand. You push the heavy pedals and you light the dark land. We do not need a battery to navigate the road. We generate the fire carrying the heavy load. If we stop moving, the illumination destination fades to black. A strict and unforgiving rule upon the gravel track. It forces us to compromise and keep the steady burn. A synchronized devotion every single turn. People want a love that just requires them to sit. A lazy sort of movie where they never have to commit. But sweat is the currency that buys a real view. I wipe it from my forehead and I smile back at you. Spin the rubber tire, make the silver scream. Push the heavy gears, wake the sleeping dream. The hill is getting steeper but the yellow beam is strong. We generate the anchor proving we belong. I realize that loving is an active moving choice. A muscular commitment giving silent things a voice. You cannot coast to neutral and expect the path to shine. You have to grind the pavement to ensure the light is fine. The humming of the dynamo is music to my ear. A rough and rugged lullaby erasing all the fear. We crest the heavy mountain and the city lies below. I ease up on the pedals just to watch the fading glow. The journey takes a toll but the destination is clear. I trust the spinning friction that has brought us safely here. Pedal in the earning every inch of light. A collaborative engine in the middle of the night. You don't expect the magic just to fall into your hand. You push the heavy pedals and you light the dark land. The battery is empty but the generator hums. I ride into tomorrow, ready for whatever comes. The wheel spins, the light shines. We are moving. A slip of thermal paper folded in my denim jean. A record of the finest dinner I had ever seen. We paid the final tab and walked out in the pouring rain, ignoring all the weather and the upcoming pain. I left it in the pocket when I threw the jacket down and walked into the shadows of the busy Russian town. I reached inside the fabric just to find the printed date, a tiny confirmation of a complicated fate. But water soaked the cotton and it seeped into the white, dissolving all the numbers in the middle of the night. The blue ink washed away into a cloudy toxic gray, erasing every detail of that ordinary day. The total is a puddle of an undefined hue, erasing the remaining evidence of me and you. Blurred proof, melting on a tiny fragile sheet, a messy illustration of a quiet side. I try to read the items that we ordered in the past, but water kills the thermal ink and tears it down fast. You cannot prove a history when the document is dead. I stare at the distortion of the bitter words we said. Blurred proof, melting on a tiny fragile sheet, a messy illustration of a quiet sad defeat. I try to read the items that we ordered in the past, but water kills the thermal ink and tears it down fast. You cannot prove a history when the document is dead. I stare at the distortion of the bitter words we said. I try to hold it to the lamp to see the fade impress, a frantic navigation in a horrifying mess. But chemicals don't negotiate when moisture intervenes. They turn the sharpest memories to blurry, awful scenes. We thought a steady promise was an undeniable fact, but neglected all the weather on the solitary track. The receipt is just a ghost without a number or a name, a visual termination of a terrifying game. Rub the heavy paper, watch the fabric tear, fail to read the moment fading in the air. The ink is a disaster and the memory is gone. I do not have the record to continue holding on. I realize that clinging to a fabricated trace is volunteering for an empty and a hollow space. Love requires a presence, not a fading printed line. You cannot find a future in a water-ruined sign. We left the good intention sitting open in the storm and sacrificed the structure of a comfortable norm. I roll the damn peep up in a tiny useless ball and toss it in the garbage, disregarding it all. I do not need a receipt to validate the pain. I leave the empty jacket and I step into the rain. Melting on a tiny fragile sheet, let it dry, a messy illustration of a quiet sad defeat. I try to read the history but the water washed the ink. I surrender the illusion and forget the things I think. You cannot prove a history when the document is dead. I drop the ruined paper and I walk the street instead. The ink runs, the page is blank. I am done. Rubber on the rocks. A heavy leather hiking boot sitting on the gravel trail. The saddest exhibition of a highly broken tale. We laced the nylon tight to climb the highest jagged peak, believing in the summit that we really wanted to seek. The path was getting steeper and the rocks began to slide, a terrifying challenge where the weary travelers hide. But halfway up the mountain ridge, the glue began to give. A structural disaster, refusing to let the journey live. The thick and heavy rubber peeled away from the toe, a warning sign demanding that my tired feet should know. The soul was flapping open like an agonizing jaw, exposing all the weakness of a fundamental flaw. The tread is hanging useless on the dirty rocky ground. A harsh and sudden ending without any warning sound. Losing the tread, stumbling on the jagged broken stone, a physical translation of the feeling all alone. I tried to walk the mountain but the shoe is falling off, leaving me vulnerable to the winds that scarf. You cannot climb a summit when the foundation is destroyed. I stand upon the gravel in an isolated void. Losing the tread, stumbling on the jagged broken stone, a physical translation of the feeling all alone. I try to walk the mountain but the shoe is falling off, leaving me vulnerable to the winds that scarf. You cannot climb a summit when the foundation is destroyed. I stand upon the gravel in an isolated void. I tried to wrap a shoelace around the center of the boot to orchestrate a rescue for the rest of the route, but tying broken rubber only guarantees a trip. A fatal misstep on a sinking heavy ship. We aim for the horizon with equipment that was flawed, ignoring all the friction that we previously ignored. The foam is ripped to pieces and the traction is a joke. I watch our grand ambition disappear in the smoke. Pull! The heavy rubber hit the fabric tear. Fail! To find the grip in the freezing air. The mountain is a monster and the shoe is totally dead. I'm retreating from the summit, then the bitter words we said. I realized that forcing the corrupted want to climb is volunteering to waste an irreplaceable time. Love requires a footing that is durable indeed. You cannot hike a mountain with the promise you can't keep. We rushed into the wilderness and broke the vital gear, and sacrificed our safety to an arrogant idea. I sit upon a boulder and I pull the laces loose, accepting the reality of the subtle quiet abuse. I leave the broken boot up on the center of the trail, and live my way back downward, letting the quiet fail. Losing the tread, stumbling on the jagged broken stone. Let it drop, let it drop. A physical translation of the feeling all alone. Time to stop. I try to wrap the laces but the rubber had to break. I surrendered the ambition for my own exhausted sake. You cannot climb a summit when the foundation is destroyed.